On your Tuesday episode of Locked On Raptors, a bad bout of lottery luck sets the stage for a pretty quiet Raptors offseason. And you know what? That's just fine.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, May the 13th, and I am your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 11 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Blue Sky. You can find the show on Instagram, and you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. Link in the description of the podcast. Free to join, as always. Great place. Come be part of our listener community that's ever growing around the show. Lots of lottery reaction and chit chat going on in there. On today's show, we are going to kind of set the stage for the offseason now that the dust has settled and cleared after Monday's draft lottery, which of course left the Toronto Raptors with the 9th overall pick in the 2025 NBA draft. We will get into some strategy for that pick, what I'd like to see the Raptors target, big guard, whatever position fit. Do they trade the pick? We'll get into all of that. We're also going to take a look at the roster the Raptors have to work with, largely because I think it's pretty much set, and that's where we're going to start here today. I think the big prevailing takeaway for me from last night's lottery is that with falling to 9, I think the stage has basically been set here for a very chill, very quiet Raptors offseason where not a whole lot is going to happen. And you know what, man? That's okay. I think with where this team is at, the fact that they got Brandon Ingram before free agency, it would be free agency move if he had gone all the way to UFA this summer. They get that business done early. There's your big offseason move. Had they moved up in the draft lottery, had they gotten someone like Cooper Flagg, who instantly necessitates you start making team building decisions that are all tailored towards maximizing him and optimizing his first 4 years on a rookie scale deal, I think we could have been in for a little bit more moving and shaking. But with the 9th overall pick and all the salary ramifications that come from that, I think we're looking at an offseason where the team is basically already set with a couple of guys who could be interchanged. We will get into that as we get into the roster breakdown. But let's just kind of set the stage for the moves that won't happen and the sort of reasons why I think we're looking at a pretty static roster from, where we look at it from today versus what it'll be when the season begins. First of all, let's start with the big one. Obviously, there was news yesterday from Shams Charania regarding Giannis Antetokounmpo as he is pondering his future in Milwaukee, seemingly more seriously than he ever has before. Obviously, the Giannis sweepstakes are going to be a thing this summer. I do think the Raptors falling to 9 basically renders the Raptors out of that running. Things can happen. Maybe he, obviously the personal intentions and desires of Giannis will certainly come into play here. If he wants to go to a specific place, there's always a chance the Bucks take care of him, and maybe he wants to go play in Toronto. My guess is he wants to go play somewhere where he can win a championship, and Toronto is not the only place that can offer that. I don't think he's going to handpick the Raptors as his next destination like Damian Lillard tried to handpick the Miami Heat. I think this is going to be more of a broad, wide open sweepstakes of a bunch of teams that have real stuff to throw at the Bucks in an offer. And I just think the only way the Raptors are really going to have a real dog in this race is if they had moved up to 1 or 2 in the draft and had that golden ticket chip to say, hey, Milwaukee, I know you guys are sad to be moving on from your guy, but hey, start your franchise now with this. Clean slate, you get Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, and you can go off and run and start to build a team around that guy. We'll take Giannis off your hands. I just don't see the Raptors having that level of package now that they have the 9th pick this year. And yes, they have all of their picks going forward, but not all first-round picks are made the same. And I think there's a key advantage that a team like the Houston Rockets has that I've gone into a little bit on the show, but I'll repeat for those who haven't been listening over the last couple of weeks, and maybe you're tuning in just post-lottery. The Suns picks that the Houston Rockets got from the Brooklyn Nets, those picks are like a wonderful asset to have in a potential Giannis move because it gives the Bucks a team to bet against that is not the team that Giannis is going to. This is the inherent problem if the Raptors were to go and try to make a move for Giannis, is they only have their own picks to offer. And so you get Giannis, you send, here's all your future swaps and everything to the Bucks, but the Bucks, who don't have their own draft picks, are sitting there hoping that the Raptors falter, and the Bucks themselves have just seen what it's like to have Giannis on your team. You're going to win a lot of games. You're going to be picking in the late 20s, most likely, if you're the Raptors with Giannis. And the Bucks, sitting there without their own picks or the ability to tank, need to be shorting other teams around the league. They need to be betting against teams that do not have Giannis Antetokounmpo, that have a chance of offering up a high pick at some point in the next few years, like the Phoenix Suns, who are about as doomed gets. So that's problem number one. Those San Antonio Spurs moving up to number 2 to get the prospective Dylan Harper pick also really, I think, renders the Raptors out of this running. If the Spurs decide to pony up and say, hey, number 2, salary filler, Stephon Castle, whatever it takes, here you go. Dylan Harper, maybe not a perfect fit with De'Aaron Fox, but that's okay. We can use Dylan Harper to go and get ourselves Giannis to make the most disgusting front court pairing that's ever existed, and Giannis and Victor Wembanyama. I think the Spurs have a way better chance of getting a deal over the finish line than the Raptors do with their offering of, Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, all their picks is basically what they can do. And I think, barring a trade for Giannis, there's just not a superstar who seems to be coming available this offseason. And things can change, obviously. The NBA is always fluid. Things break, in all kinds of ways you don't expect. Injuries happen in the playoffs. We'll talk a little about the one from last night, the Jayson Tatum injury, which is a gigantic bummer, but has real-life ramifications for all of these teams. Ultimately, though, I just don't see a guy coming available that makes the Raptors sort of in a position where it's worth ponying up everything they need to get a superstar. Giannis is one thing. Your tiers below that, not so much. And I think because of that, you're going to see a pretty static offseason. I think RJ Barrett is here for next year. I think he's staying put. I think the big thing here is the salary slot that the Raptors are going to be giving to their rookie who comes in with the first round pick now is way less than it would have been if they had stayed, if they jumped into the top, or if, when they made the Brandon Ingram trade, they were 5th in the odds. If they stayed at 5th, picked 5th, that would have changed the sort of calculus of this as well, and the luxury tax, ramifications and everything. RJ Barrett was always a potential casualty if the team was going to be an over-the-tax team, threatening the aprons, whatever. That's not going to be a concern anymore. With the Raptors now at the 9th pick, the rookie scale there is about $2.7 million less than it would have been if they'd gotten the 5th pick. About, $6.5 million less than it would have been had they gotten first overall. Sorry, $7.5 million, that is. If my math's correct. I don't think it is correct. I think it's 6.5. Either way, they're $1.2 million less even than they would have had to pay if they were at the 7th pick. The rookie scale is descending. And so with that, there's going to be more wiggle room. We don't got to get too bogged down into the salary cap details, but based on my very rudimentary math, using Spot Track as a very helpful resource, as well as our two pals, Blake Murphy and Daniel Hackett, two of the best in the biz who do cap stuff for the Raptors. Basically it looks like this. If you assume AJ Lawson and Colin Castleton get the 2 roster spots, or at the very least 2 other guys on minimum deals occupy those spots. Of course, those Castleton and Lawson, their deals are non-guaranteed for next year. They have camp invites. If they make the team, great, they're on minimum deals. If they don't, those minimum slots become available. Maybe those get taken up by a 2nd round pick or an undrafted free agent. The Raptors should nestle in just under the luxury tax with 14 players on the roster, which is a legal roster. You can go in with 1 empty roster spot to the season. That's totally fine. They could go into the year with 14, or they could make use of the taxpayer mid-level exception, which is about $5.2 million to either bring back Chris Boucher, which maybe that's enough money to keep him around. Maybe it's not. Not sure what the market's going to look like for Boucher after he didn't play for the last few months of the season, but maybe there's enough. Maybe that's a fair number for both sides, and he's happy to come back at 5.2-ish, just under that. Or you try to bring in a more traditional backup center with that $5.2 million. The pool you're playing in there, pretty shallow. Steven Adams, Kevon Looney, Clint Capella feels a little too rich. Luke Cornett is maybe the best option of the potential UFA big man free agents. After that, it's a pretty grim scene. So, Boucher, a big, filling in that last spot on a taxpayer mid-level deal. It puts the Raptors into luxury tax, but still comfortably below the first apron of the luxury tax, which is really where you don't want to be playing. It's about $12 million above what the luxury tax is. And so if you're, $5 million over the luxury tax, you're still just paying the tax. It's a small tax bill. And as I've said before, you can get out of the tax before the end of next season if you really feel like you have to. If it feels like, okay, maybe there's not something happening here with Ochai Agbaji, you don't extend him. Maybe you just want to get off that money before you have to pay him this summer. It's not quite working out. Other guys take his spot. Then you can move Ochai Agbaji for a pick or something, get under the tax, no problem. There are ways to do it, and you just got to get like a wee tiny bit creative to see those ways. And I think that's probably the way they go here. They can go into the season over the tax knowing they can easily duck it if they must, or they can just pay a small tax bill, not be bothered by any of the apron implications that make team building really difficult and trades hard to execute and draft picks more limited. It's just, you're just a regular run-of-the-mill tax team, and you go into the year like that with a pretty deep roster. We're going to get into the roster and whether it can hang in this Eastern Conference now that we kind of know what it's mostly going to look like. We'll do that coming back in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by Wayfair. The days are getting longer, the weather's warming up, and people are spending more time outside, which means it's the perfect time to refresh your outdoor space. I just spent this past weekend getting our backyard ready to go, doing some gardening, bringing out the old furniture, all that stuff. It's wonderful. And if you're in need of a spruce up of your outdoor furniture, hey, that stuff, it doesn't last forever. It gets weathered, animals get into it, whatever it might be. Sometimes you got to replace that stuff. Wayfair has everything you need to make it feel more like you and replace your outdoor setup. You can grab a new patio dining set or some string lights. I got some pretty sweet string lights out back. It's very nice ambiance. You can go and do that with Wayfair, and you can find everything that you might want. It's free. The delivery is free and hassle-free as well, even for the big stuff, which is wonderful. And whether you're entertaining guests or just relaxing solo, shop Wayfair. You can help you unwind after your long days. You can sit in your yard, have a cocktail, read a book. It's beautiful, all in your beautiful outdoor Wayfair furniture. Shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online this summer. Get outside with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Back at it here on your, Tuesday? I don't know. It's our third podcast in like 24 hours. Tuesday edition of Locked On Raptors, talking about the stage being now set for the Raptors offseason. And it's kind of having a pretty good idea, barring some crazy developments, of what this team is going to look like. And honestly, I'm not so displeased with how this roster is lining up going into next year. Yes, it would have been awesome to get the top-end talent infusion that a Cooper Flagg or a Dylan Harper would have provided to this team. It would have taken the top right off of this build and made all kinds of really interesting, fun things possible in the future. But I also think there's a lot of reason to think the roster they have now, not for next year necessarily. I don't think they're going to go win themselves multiple playoff rounds a year from now or anything like that. But next year's roster can be step one back towards regular perennial playoff relevancy, which that's all I've ever wanted, man. That's all I've yearned for. And I think a lot of folks in the fan base are yearning for that too. I know there are some who are very championship or bust brained, and hey, to each their own. Be a fan, whoever you want to be a fan. I think just kind of, if you're only of the mind that, hey, this roster can or cannot win a championship, and if it cannot, it is a failure of a team build, I think you're setting yourself up for a lot of disappointment. And I think you're really setting yourself up to miss a lot of the fun stuff that can happen when you have a good team capable of playing fun hoop over the course of multiple years, which I think this team is moving in the direction of. How does this roster stack up? Let's go through it. The starters, you're looking at Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, Jakob Poeltl. Seems like a pretty chalk answer. We talked yesterday in the live show with Vivek Jacob, sort of our ideal starting fives. I think you could make an argument for Ochai Agbaji in place of RJ Barrett. I think you can make an argument to have Jacoby Walter eventually take that spot. My bet in 2-3 years' time is that Walter is the fifth starter on this team. I'm very into Jacoby Walter. I think he does a lot of stuff on both ends of the floor that's very exciting, but just pure talent-wise, Quickley, Barrett, Ingram, Barnes, Poeltl feels like the mix. Look, it's not a perfect fitting starting five. We don't know exactly what it looks like just yet. Obviously, we haven't seen them play together. We know that I think Quickley and Poeltl have a nice two-man game and chemistry. I think Quickley and Barnes found a lot in their chemistry as the season went down the stretch and really kind of ironed out the way they can leverage each other's strengths and skills to make life easier for one another. I think RJ Barrett, he performed well with Scotty on the floor this year. He's had some moments running pick and roll with Poeltl. Him and Quickley have a long-standing on-court sort of kinship from their time back in New York. I've talked about Barrett. I think he's the kind of interesting fit here. The three-point shot kind of falling off this season is a bit of a concern, but if he can get back to where he was at the end of that season in his first half year in Toronto, where he was this ruthlessly efficient play finishing guy who was ready to take open catch and shoot threes, knocked him down at a good clip, finished at the rim while on the move, not too much in terms of handling the ball or high touch time. I think there's a version of RJ Barrett that fits on this team. Like we saw it when Pascal Siakam was on this team for a very brief stretch, and you saw the Quickly, Barrett, Barnes, Siakam quartet kind of make some fun basketball music on the floor. I think you can sort of hope for reasonably a similar effect once Brandon Ingram is there. Obviously a different player than Pascal Siakam, but like not that dissimilar. And I think the fit can work if RJ is all right with being like the fourth banana on the offense, the fifth banana sometimes, who's just there to finish plays, be a bull in transition, and hopefully offer some of those flashes of defense that we saw at points this season. The starting five, I think, should at least be a positive group, and there are ways you can fiddle around with it, swap guys in and out, change that second starting spot, the two guards starting spot, that is, with a Walter or a Grady Dick or an Ochai Agbaji, and just kind of throw different looks out and see what works. I think I'm cool with that starting five. The bench, look, a lot of internal growth is going to be needed from this bench group. You got Jamal Shed, Jacoby Walter, Grady Dick, Ochai Agbaji, Jonathan Mobo, all guys with 3 or fewer years of experience in the NBA, 3 of them just coming off of a rookie season where they showed good things, but there's got to be more, right? The bet for this team is that they're going to achieve internal development for their young players. And it's a very important bet that they hit on. If they don't, this whole model of team building becomes pretty tenuous, because you get back to that era of Raptors basketball in the late Nick Nurse stages where you have a really good starting five, lots of good players there. You take one piece out, one guy gets hurt, whatever it might be, one guy has an off night, and there's just nothing to fill in on the back end of the bench. It's like a shark with no spare teeth to fill in. I am willing and very eager and hopeful to bet on the internal development of these guys. We saw a massive year 1 to year 2 jump for Grady Dick. Yes, he lost gas by the end of the season, but he also carried an inordinately huge burden to start the year and was damn good during that stretch. I think the version of Grady Dick we saw in the first half of the year with a lesser overall usage rate is going to be closer to the version we get going forward. The defense obviously has to come around, but you can cover for that. And the playoffs are kind of where that'll come home to roost more than anything else. Let's just worry about getting to the playoffs first. Jacoby Walter, I'm expecting a big jump in year 2. He looked so much more comfortable near the end of the year than he did at the start of the year when he was just kind of getting his feet wet. Missed training camp, was injured for the first month of the season, then gets in and finally starts to, make some hay as the season goes along. I think the three-point shooting he showed is real. I think the two-way versatility he showed is very real. I think he can play on the ball and off the ball. I'm projecting him to be a really, really important part of this team going forward. And I wouldn't be surprised if we come out of next year and you're looking at Walter as like the 5th or 6th best player on this team, already pushing for a starting job going into year 3. Jamal Shed, I felt all along, he's got classic good backup point guard written all over him. I feel pretty good about his development taking the right steps. Jonathan Mobo is the big question, right? He's small. He can't shoot. He had a hard time finishing around the rim. There's got to be a lot of steps taken forward there. And if you are not comfortable with him as the go-to starting 5 next year, I get it. That's where you maybe bring back Chris Boucher, or you go get yourself a Luke Cornett in free agency to be that sort of, sturdy backup 5 where Mobo can kind of mix in, make lineups longer for you, play small ball 5 in spots here and there, get spot minutes when guys are out, whatever that might be. I think there's still a role for Mobo here, and I think they're pretty invested in his development. He's going to be around. He's on a guaranteed deal. I think he's going to be part of the mix. If you don't want him to be the first guy off the bench behind Jakob Poeltl, I totally get it. Again, I think a lot of Scotty Barnes at the 5 is in store for next year too. But I understand if you're concerned if Mobo is the answer at backup 5. Then you have the deeper bench guys. Obviously, we don't know who the 9th pick is going to be. We don't know who the 39th pick is going to be. The Raptors have that Blazers second rounder as well. I'd expect both will be on the roster. The 39th pick, I'd assume, will just be a minimum deal, like they did with Mobo and Shed. Maybe a 3-year deal type of thing, like they've done with those guys to give them some runway. The 9th pick, anybody's guess. The shape of the bench changes if they draft Kaman Malawash or Derek Queen to be your backup center. That changes Mobo's role. And I think maybe you're more comfortable with that more traditional big man as your backup, getting reps behind Poeltl. Obviously, Jamison Battle's in here as well. I think, Battle, I think totally proved that his shooting is going to keep him on the floor. He made some strides defensively. He's a good rebounder. He's got some good instincts. He moves well. He's pretty big. I think we're going to see Jamison Battle be part of the plans next year too. And then you have the AJ Lawson, Colin Castleton / undrafted free agent spot. I think that's going to be one of those three guys. Who knows who the UDFA will be, but one of those three guys I think will probably take up spot 14. And then you have your Chris Boucher / backup center you sign theoretically with your taxpayer mid-level, and you go forward with that being your team. Maybe they don't bring in that taxpayer mid-level guy. Maybe they just go with 14 dudes. Maybe the undrafted free agent or the second round pick becomes a guy you try to bring along as a backup center. Who's to say? Maybe Ulrich Shamshay is one of the two ways, along with Jared Rhoden becomes your guy. Either way, I think that's a roster that, again, it's not winning you a title next year. It's probably not even winning you around next year, but I still wouldn't rule it out. The East is looking extremely tenuous going into next season. The Jayson Tatum injury is a gigantic bummer, and we don't even have a full diagnosis yet at the time of recording. Seems like everybody is expecting the worst with that. I don't even want to say the word because hopefully it's not what it is. But if it is what it is, and what everyone seems to think it is, the Celtics might just be off the board as a heavy hitter next year. They have a lot of salary cap concerns going into this summer as well. Could legit be the end of the window for the Celtics team, opening up a vacancy near the top of the conference. Not to say the Raptors will occupy, maybe the Pacers go from a 4 seed to or 5 seed, wherever they were, to a 2 seed or something like that. Who knows what's going to happen with the Cavs? Maybe they make a big move if they go out unceremoniously in the playoffs. The Knicks, I think, are going to be around. They're very good, but 4 through 6 in that playoff picture could be wide open, especially if the Bucks are trading Giannis. And I think the Raptors can very comfortably sell themselves on the idea they can step into one of those spots. The Magic will be there. Maybe the Hawks will be there if Jalen Johnson's healthy. Some other team will probably make steps forward. The Pistons obviously were there this year. We'll see if they can continue over the success, or maybe they have one of those classic, we had a great season, then kind of have a bounce back, a step back the following year type of years. We'll see. But I think that roster, yes, it'd be great, again, if they had added a Cooper Flag to the mix. But I think the roster they're going into next season with has a chance to be deep, has a chance to be versatile, can play a few different ways. And I think that's a great way to navigate a regular season and rack up the number of wins you need to be comfortably in that top 6 conversation. I feel pretty good about that. And look, if they lose in the first round next year, that doesn't just resign them to always losing in the first round in years to follow, right? This is the thing. It's building incrementally. It's, taking a step and then hoping you can add a step on top of that the following year. Learning stuff in the playoffs and then adjusting your roster to do that. The Toronto Raptors did this about as well as anyone has ever done over the course of the last decade when they got from 2013 to 2020, when they just kind of made little moves year over year, suffered failure, adapted to it, made moves in response, and then they won 50-something games 5 years in a row, won a championship at the tail end of it. I think this is the build that makes a lot of sense for the Raptors. And to go back to my point on yesterday's show, I'm thrilled that this option is here, that they're taking this avenue as opposed to playing this lottery dance every single year, which is doomed to end in disappointment for most teams. Talk to the Utah Jazz today, see how things are going down there in Salt Lake City or in DC today after last night's lottery. We'll come back on the other side. Now that we know they're picking 9th, let's get into some of the strategy of the pick. We won't get to specific guys necessarily, though a couple of names will come up, I'm sure. But let's just kind of get into what we want to see the Raptors do with that pick. How should they approach it? Do they trade it? Do they trade up, trade down? Is there a specific player archetype they should be after? We'll get into that to close out today's show in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by CarGurus. Shopping for a car should be exciting. It should be fun, not exhausting, but between confusing prices, hidden fees, it can feel overwhelming. That's why you got to be trying CarGurus. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. With over 4 million listings, CarGurus has more new and used cars than any major online marketplace in the U.S. They verify dealers, provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and data you need to make the right choice without second-guessing yourself. Buying a new car is all second guessing. It's all, oh no, is this car the right fit? Does this have the right mileage? Am I getting a car that's been taken care of versus not? CarGurus can help you sort through all of those questions. You get price drop alerts as well, so you know exactly when the perfect car is available for your budget. It's no wonder SimilarWeb estimated traffic data shows that CarGurus is the #1 most visited car shopping site. Buy or sell your next car today with CarGurus at CarGurus.com. Go to CarGurus.com to make sure your deal is the best deal. That's CarGurus.com, CarGurus.com. Go check them out. Wrapping it up here on your Tuesday edition of Locked On Raptors, setting the stage for the offseason. And of course, the next big thing we got our eyes on is the draft in about 6 weeks' time. 9th overall, your Toronto Raptors will be selecting, as we revisited last night. And I think the Raptors posted about this themselves. The 9th pick has not been a bad spot for the Raptors to be over the years. Tracy McGrady, 9th overall in 1997. He turned out pretty good. Not in Toronto, but that was before they had ways to keep players in the place where they're drafted longer. So we'll give him a pass on that one. DeMar DeRozan worked out pretty well. Number 9 in 2009. And then Jakob Poeltl, of course, number 9 in 2016. Look, this is a draft where, I think the opinions kind of vary. I have said a lot. I think the range from 3 through 10, 11, 12 in this draft is very much eye of the beholder. I think a lot of it is going to come down to fit and team needs. And I know that's not always how teams draft, but I think a lot of the players in this class have very specific skill sets that are going to work best or not work on certain teams. And so I do think, without there being like a ton of guys who have like true star upside in that 3 through 12 range, I think there's a lot of guys who figure to be really excellent, like high-end starters, starter level role players, damn good players who play important minutes for good teams. I think the teams that take those guys are going to take fit into account here, because the upside swings maybe aren't quite as clear or obvious. And so you got to draft for guys who can fit in and meld in with your team. Obviously, some of these teams are really bad, and so maybe they will take the upside plays. Maybe the more sure things end up falling a little bit further down. No idea how the Jazz or the Wizards or the Nets are going to approach this draft after having lotto disappointment. That like the Raptors, yeah, you drop 2 spots from 7 to 9. That's not great. Those teams falling from where they were, I think, 1st, 2nd, and 5th respectively in the odds, down to 5, 6, and 8. Man, oh man, rough stuff for all 3 of those teams who just like don't have any talent on hand, and it's going to be difficult for them to go and add to the mix. For the Raptors, obviously there's always the thing where someone could just fall who's really good and just take that guy. Obviously, everyone's board's different. We don't know what the Raptors board exactly is going to look like. Probably won't until we get some open gym, retrospective in 5-10 years about whoever they take. And maybe we get a snapshot of the whiteboard or something like that. Shout out to the Bruno Caboclo open gym clip, which is going to live for forever in infamy. I think, for me, I've talked a lot about upside being a big thing, and I think that still applies here, even though you're at number 9. I think if the Raptors are trying to really optimize this draft slot and believe in their developmental juice with Darko Rajakovic, who seems to be very good at the player development thing he was hired to do, I think you take a guy who, if it all hits, if all the swing skills swing the right way, does have stardom in his outcomes. I think that's probably the way I'm looking here first. Less for positional fit, because the team is kind of set. We know what the starting lineup's going to look like. We know what the different variations of the starting lineup can look like. They don't need to go draft a guy who can be a starter plug and play from day one. They just need to get some talent in the door. And I think they need to really prioritize positional size as well. That said, a guy like Jeremiah Fears, who I talked about on the live show a little bit last night, like if he's available, to me, that's your pure upside swing. I think there's a lot of downside with him too. It could just not work out. But if he's able to figure out the rim finishing stuff, if the touch from the free throw line and mid-range translates in the NBA to a good 3-point shot, some pull-up juice from 3, I think Jeremiah Fears is probably the highest upside guy on the board after your Cooper Flag, Dylan Harper tier. If he's there at 9, I think you maybe just take the swing and hope you can kind of figure it out. He can come in next year. Obviously, you have a pretty loaded guard room. Maybe that necessitates a move sometime down the line. Maybe that makes a move in the middle of next year to dodge the tax, a little bit easier to stomach because, you have yourself a lot of insulation at the position, whatever. But I think that's a pretty interesting high upside, creative type you could swing on. Beyond that, I don't see a ton in the way of like lead creator upside among this class. And so I'm looking at guys who can fill in the gaps. Can you be a secondary, tertiary, complementary star in your role type of guy? And from there, that's where the positional fit comes into me. I think, barring Jeremiah Fears being there, none of the other guards are like terribly interesting to me. I think I'm looking big wings and big men. That's really what I think this team needs to kind of balance its mix of guys. We've talked about Jonathan Mobo. Like, he is the go-to backup center as the roster exists right now. If that makes you a little queasy, I think it's fair. As much as I love me some Jonathan Mobo, So why not go and get yourself a big man? And I think there are going to be a lot there. Obviously, I don't need to wax more poetic about Kaman Malawash, who I think is my favorite guy, my dream. If he falls to 9, I am over the moon, having the time of my life, streaking through the streets of Hamilton, Ontario, if they get Kaman Malawash at 9. Maybe not to that extent, but we'll see. Who knows? It'll be a hot day, I'm guessing. Either way, I think like he's the guy for me. But beyond that, I mean, Derek Queen is, not a perfect fit to me. Not really. He's a tough fit with Scotty Barnes in particular, but a talent play at number 9 for Derek Queen. Obviously, he's got a lot of juice to him. He's got a lot that's working for him. Wouldn't hate it. And he's big. He's not as big as you maybe like, but he's big. Asa Newell is another one. If he can figure out how to shoot, I think the rim protection stuff, the rim running stuff, all very interesting there. The defense with him is very interesting. There's a guy, Maxime Reynaud, who I'm definitely going to do an episode about, who is a 7-foot big man, who stroked it pretty decently from 3 at Stanford this past year, 34%, rim protection, all that stuff. Maybe he's a guy you take a swing on. Obviously, I've talked about Noah Senge. There's Colin Murray Boyles, who is going to come up as more of a wing type, 6'6", and a half, I believe, measured at the combine yesterday, with a close to 7'1" wingspan, very Masai-like dimensions if you're thinking about their kind of typical type in the draft, though they haven't gone that way the last couple of years as they prioritize shooting, but maybe this is a return to form. We've talked about Yohan Berenger a little bit from France, maybe a little bit more of a reach, but I think there's a lot of dudes there who are pretty interesting, and that's kind of, I think, where I'm leaning here. I'm not trading down with this pick. I know there's some suggestion out there. Oh, could you get the OKC Thunder to give you 15 and 24 for the Raptors pick at number 9? Or is there other teams that have multiple firsts that you could go and make a swap with? To me, few reasons I'm not doing that. One, we talk about trading down all the time, trading up. It never happens. We could just live in the real world. It just very rarely ever actually happens. And so until it does happen, I'm not really in the business of speculating on trade down scenarios because they're so rare. Most of the time teams fall in love with guys and just want to take their guy where they pick. I think as well, if you're looking for upside, if you're looking for the best possible optimization of your draft slot, I think for the Raptors, just taking the best guy that's there at number 9, taking your guy, I think that's preferable to dropping down and then maybe your guy is no longer there when you're up on the board at 15 or wherever it might be. And there's also the salary implications as well, right? The Raptors with a $6.3-ish million slot at number 9, that's great. If you swap that for 15 and 24, those two rookie scale deals combine to make $8 million that you're handing out to your rookies in the first round. And that makes the offseason math a little bit more tricky to crunch. And so just for simplicity's sake as well, I think just picking at 9 where you are, you're either going to get someone who's fallen from that upper tier of guys, or you're going to be able to take your pick of the next group of dudes and prioritize what you feel you need to prioritize, be it upside, positional fit, whatever. I think that is that's preferable to me. So I'm not trading this pick. I'm just hanging on to it. I'm not trading it for an upgrade on the roster either. I think having affordable rookie scales talent on your team is incredibly important. We're seeing the value of this already with Jamal Shed and Jacoby Walter and Grady Dick and Jonathan Mobo and Jamison Battle. You get cheap young players in the door, it can turn your life around pretty quickly, and it makes more things possible down the line when it comes to trades, consolidation moves, things like that. So I'm just taking this pick. I'm trying to optimize it the best I can. And ideally, I'm looking for size if I'm not getting an upside plan of Jeremiah Fears type. But we'll have plenty of time to cast a very wide net over potential prospects the Raptors could look at with the 9th pick. We're going to tomorrow on the podcast have Rich Stamen on from Locked On NBA Big Board to just kind of get a feel for that range in the draft and some guys he likes. I'm looking forward to that quite a bit. And yeah, we're going to have plenty of draft coverage over the next handful of weeks here going into a big draft for the Raptors. It's not the big sexy draft we thought it was maybe going to be, but it's a big one nonetheless to add probably the best prospect in their mix pedigree wise to the team. It's a big one for sure. It's the biggest thing happening this offseason for the Raptors, I think, as we've kind of covered here today. And so we will cover it extensively between now and draft time. Thank you so much for rocking with the show. Thanks to any new subscribers. We got a few new ones last night after the live show and all that stuff. It's nice to have you on board. Hopefully you stick with us here through the offseason into next year. I'm looking forward to covering winning basketball, man. I think they've got it in them. I think the conference is setting itself up for them to have it in them. And, it might just take a kind of a chill off season to get there, but it'll still be a very good podcast to listen to if you're trying to keep tabs on what's going on with the team throughout the summer, be fully prepared for the draft, all that good stuff. So thanks in advance for doing that. Love everyone. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend, et cetera, et cetera. We'll talk to you Wednesday with our pal Rich from Locked On NBA Big Board. Until then, thanks for hanging. Bye-bye. Oh, I found the line.